Welcome everyone. Good afternoon. We are delighted to see a full room, and we are also waiting to start because we will be joined virtually by a number of participants. So I think it's time to start now. We will have a little bit of a housekeeping. We wanted to share that obviously this is a safe and inclusive space for all participants. Your feedback is very much welcome. Please do share your views, and we would like to get your permission to share information and a summary format for documentation. So IDB wanted us to share with you that the information that will be gathered throughout this panel, including your comments and question, will help summarize and contribute to the civil society organization annual report. So we will also have some videos and recording. We seek your permission for filming and for photographing this session. If you have any concern regarding confidentiality, safety, and participation during the session, please do let us know, or the IDB staff. And we are pleased to inform you that you can use the QR code of the Pigeonhole. Maybe some of you are already familiar. Please do use this if you have questions. We will give some time at the end of the session to cover these questions. So there is also a passcode, Samarkand 2026. And of course, if you have any question, do not hesitate to contact our organizer, who are doing an amazing job. So I'd like to begin by thanking the Asian Development Bank for convening this session. We are really excited to be here and to share. I am Nora Sharif Shefshawni. I am the Principal Education Advisor with Save the Children, and I work across education throughout the humanitarian development nexus, including the connection and cross and intersectionality between climate, disaster risk reduction, and education, with a focus on Asia Pacific. So, I mean, I'm not saying anything new for people. I think we would like to save the children slide, if possible, on the screen. As you know, in 2024, 242 million children experienced school disruption from climate events globally, and Asia is warming nearly twice as the global average. I guess this is not new to any of you. This record-breaking storm and heat wave in 2024, 2025, unfortunately, these are not outliers or one-time events. These are becoming the new reality, the new baseline for many children and communities within Asia. And because climate change is no longer a future threat, learning is already being disrupted every day. I want to share, based on my experience of 20 years in education in emergencies, timing is really critical. When children do not go back to school rapidly, we know that a high proportion of them, and the most vulnerable, will drop permanently. Even 6 weeks of disruption significantly reduces the return rate, and many children who drop out never return. So for us, education is both a social risk and an economic risk, because without education, there's no human capital, and this is the link to widen inequality. In a recent study in 17 emergency, I want to bring the voice of the children, and 99% of children are saying that education is a priority in crisis. So Save the Children, we're bringing decades of experience in this field, and we have embedded our work in a number of regional frameworks. This is a map that is showing our footprint specifically in Asia and I'll let you have a big read through it. And I want to come back to present our panel. We have really a diverse group of speakers today, and I'm very excited to present them. So we have Francis Guesquière, who will be joining us online. He is a recognized expert in disastrous risk financing. He will talk to us about DRF landscape and how education fit within this landscape. We have here Lovisa Busmak from Accenture Development Partnership. She's a key technical partner from our Education Uninterrupted initiative, and she brings experience in parametric insurance as well as innovative finance. Our colleague from China, Haowen Fang, is here to explain how we are piloting this initiative in his country. And our young climate resilient advocate, PV Tan, is here to share her living experience of climate crisis and how it affects her young people in her community. And finally, you may know her already, Yoko Watanabe from the ADB is here to explore how innovative models like Education Uninterrupted can be supported by government and be scaled up. So I would like to encourage you to use the question, and without further ado, I will hand over now to PV. So then she gives us some background on climate resilience impact on education. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. Yes. I'm PV. My name is PV, and today I'm representing about climate disaster learning disruption in Asia. And today I want to ask you something very simple. Let's close your eye for the moment, if you can. And do you remember the day when you realized that education could change your life? And something, maybe it was something teachers whisper to you, or maybe it was like a book falling to you in the right page, or maybe it's a quiet feeling that if you keep showing up, if you keep trying, you will get there. I have that moment. And a lot of young people in Cambodia, across the Asia, in my community, have that moment too. But today, it's very uncertain. You know what? It's because climate change. Climate change in Cambodia is not something we debate as a future risk anymore. It's not graph on a screen or a number in the report. It's already our daily life. And let's take a look at these pictures. This is a girl, Conita, in my community. But look what's around her. The ground beneath her feet have cracked, ripped apart by intense heat to the point that the earth cannot hold together. And the roof of her school made by tin. And I asked her, how you feel, how you keep learning. She very emotionally to tell me that, like, in April, our hotness month, and temperature inside this room it exceed 40 to 43 degrees Celsius. And yeah, there is no cooling, no ventilation. It's just students sitting in the heat and trying to remember what teacher said. And yeah, and throwback to 2024, extreme heat and like climate related to hazard disrupted, like education is over 3.38 million students, and yeah, like our government for school to close and shorten hour, and also like create the dangerous condition. They protect their student, but in doing so, the student lost their hour, their like education lesson, and something that not recover. It's very uncertain. And yeah, let's take a look at this one more picture. What do you think about that? This is not a river. This is not a land or something. This is my community flood. Flooding in Cambodia is we expect every single year. And I used to visit, my team used to visit it before. And when we arrived there, unfortunately it's flood. And I saw most students need to have a boat to reach the school. And also they very hard, and school was almost inaccessible. And this how it's also the family when the flood destroyed crop, the family also lost their income, because we depend on crop as well. And when family lost their income, it's very happen is students were dropping out. And when students dropping out of 2 days, of 2 months, and family less pressure, facing pressure, and the classroom boom. It's empty chair. Why empty chair? Because after the flood, after intense heat, after the family lost their income and make a decision that they don't want to make the student feel like education not option anymore. And it's how the empty chair it's become normal, but it should not. And today I'm not telling you about the loss, about anything lost in Cambodia. We already doing our work. We raising awareness. We supporting our community when disaster. But what we need is inclusion, partnership that can help us going forward, can help us what we need. What we need is a classroom where to withstand heat and flood. We need a system that can allow us to learn even though disaster come, and we need faster, early, meaning responsible when a community destroyed. And also, we need young people. We need to be young people to shape that solution, because we're not just one of it. We all part the answer. And climate disaster will be maybe continue, maybe happen, but disruption education should not. If we truly listen, if we act early, if we shame, if we have that solution, if we have that problem to be not continue to happen again and again, we can protect the education. Thank you.
Thank you so much, PV. And the scale and the recurrence of the disaster and how they disrupt education in Cambodia is something that is unfortunately happening across Asia and other regions. And this is not, there are solutions already that we are putting in place, but what we want is to also call on new solutions to tackle the scale and challenge that are becoming increasingly important for these children. And so I would like now to invite a panel where we will be discussing disaster risk financing and parametric instruments with Francis and Lovisa. And Francis should be online. Hopefully we can see him on screen soon. And we would like to, before entering into technical discussion, we would like, I'm sure there are already a lot of knowledge in this room, but in order to kind of like level up the discussion, ask Francis to briefly define disaster risk financing.
Thank you, Nora. It's good to see you, and it's great to see such a large audience for this important topic. And thank you for inviting me to this panel. I wish I could have been in person, but there were elements that made it impossible. But just to answer your question, in very simple terms, a disaster risk financing strategy is basically the practice of planning in advance how money will be made available when this disaster occurs. And you'd be surprised how many government or even large organizations struggle when disaster occur and are unable to mobilize money very quickly. And so financing strategy will include a combination of financial instruments that can be budget relocation mechanism, they can be contingent lines of credit, they can be insurance, including parametric insurance, which are insurance mechanisms that tend to disburse very quickly because they're based on an index or the occurrence of an event rather than the assessment of a loss. So that allows for very, very quick assessment and a disbursement of fund. But it should be noted that a disaster risk financing strategy should also include how funds are appropriated and executed, right? It's not enough just to get the money when the disaster occurs. You have to know how you're going to transfer the money to where it needs to be, how you're going to execute those funds. Do you have emergency procurement system? Do you have contingency plan? Do you have all these other mechanisms, sometimes purely administrative mechanisms, but that need to be in place so that the response can actually take place fairly quickly. And so it's good to think about a risk financing strategy as a continuum, as a value chain that leads to effective response on the ground, thinking also of the timing. When do you need that money? If you do a humanitarian response or if you need the money really quickly to respond is different than if you need it for school reconstruction, for example, which may need money a little bit later because you need to assess the school, you need to do design, you need to mobilize contractors to start your operation. I leave it to this. So basically it's planning how money will be made available when a disaster occurs. Back to you.
Francis, from your experience, can you share maybe one or two concrete examples of disaster risk financing instruments that have successfully delivered funding at the right time, and also what difference that timing made?
Sure. So, I mean, this is about right time financing. I think a beautiful recent example, or fairly recent, is the ARC Replica program in Senegal, which in 2002 disbursed through a parametric insurance, disbursed extremely quickly funds that could be used then to buy food and distribute food in the country, avoiding not just hunger, but actually avoiding a lot of these negative coping mechanisms that are very detrimental in the medium to long term, such as children not going to school, farmers selling their cattle and not being able to recover, or even eating the seed, so not being able to plant in the following seasons. And there are really interesting assessment of this response you can read on Relief Web and others. And of course, another one, which is probably the model of all, is this Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, which was established around 2005 and has since disbursed more than $500 million, so $500 million in short-term liquidity to Caribbean countries affected by disaster, whether it's hurricanes or earthquakes or sometimes excess rainfall. And you have to realize that small island states, when they're hit by one of these events, first, they have no revenue because no tourists are going to come, but they also have additional expenses. They need to start funding reconstruction. And in many cases, they're not even able to fund their public servants, the police, and the response. And so these short-term liquidity have always been extremely useful for countries to be able to cope and then organize their response. So these are two examples. I'm happy to elaborate on those if you want, but back to you.
Very interesting examples. I will now ask Lovisa. We've seen that speed and predictability is really critical. And we would like to turn now to specifically parametric finance, parametric insurance within the DRF. Based on Accenture's experience in designing this product, for you, what is the single most important insight you wish policymakers and education leaders understood before trying to apply these tools?
Yeah, thank you, Nora. Well, if there was one message I would leave to education leaders or policyholders, it would really be this one. Do spend time thinking about the actual problem you're looking to solve, and don't rush into the solution of designing a parametric insurance product. And it might sound rather obvious or simple, but in reality, this is actually where most of that parametric insurance product turn wrong. Very often we're seeing people getting incredibly enthusiastic about the mechanics of a parametric insurance product. Some of you might be new to parametric insurance in here, so let me just take a moment to introduce you to what it actually is. It's a different instrument compared to traditional insurance that's looking to provide quicker and more efficient payouts to the policyholders. So instead of relying on assessors going on the ground and trying to quantify an actual loss, you have already agreed on a parameter, hence the name parametric, or also called a trigger, that's supposed to distribute funds to the policyholders or the communities. This trigger can be a whole array of different ones. It can be a certain wind speed. It can be a supply chain disruption, a global pandemic. There are many different variances of it. But what makes it so efficient is that all parties have in advance already agreed on what should trigger and release the funds, which means that the policyholders and the communities can get access to those funds much quicker. But it is also that speed that sometimes can make things a little bit complicated, because people rush into the design of it rather than studying the disruption. So it's important to really understand the local context of what is needed in order to address a disruption in education system, for example, or a business continuity problem or crop failure. And first, when you have thought about how it integrates into the much broader resilience strategy, that's when it can turn out to be more efficient. Because in the end of the day, it's not whether a payout is working that's going to be the key success story. It's whether you're actually able to bring, in this case, children back to school. So that would be my main key message. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to Francis now. Why do standard disaster preparedness and response system, and even many DRF mechanisms, do often fall to protect education and specifically learning continuity?
Well, Nora, I think we need to start by recognizing that these financial protection strategies or DRF mechanisms are usually put in place by ministers of finance who have their own problem. They're trying to solve budgetary issue when a disaster occurs. So most of these mechanisms are set up to solve those problems. That's the case of the Caribbean program I just mentioned. It provides liquidity to ministries of finance. But Lovisa just put her finger on another major issue, particularly for parametric insurance. I think it's been used or it's been considered as an innovation. And as an innovation, it falls into the trap of an innovation looking for a problem rather than a problem looking for a solution. And very often people have been so focused on using parametric insurance that they forgot this whole value chain that I mentioned earlier. If I come back to this response from ARC Replica, I think this was actually a fairly smart response. If you know a little bit about famines, and if you have read Amartya Sen, for example, you will quickly realize that famines are very often the result not so much of a lack of food. Yes, it's often it's part of a lack of food, but famine occur very much because of traders who start to speculate over the price of food, and so they hold their reserves and they don't distribute them, and they wait for prices to go up. And in this situation, if ARC Replica had been pouring more money, just bringing money to the market, it would have been the equivalent of putting oil to a fire. But instead what they did is that they used this money to buy food outside of Senegal, bring that food and distribute it, and thus breaking the speculative behavior of the trader and letting then the market function properly. But if we go back to the education system, and Lovisa also mentioned this learning continuity issues. I think a lot of mechanisms in the past have been set up to finance the reconstruction of schools, but that doesn't solve the problem of kids dropping out and not coming back. Reconstructing school takes months, sometimes years. There needs to be a mechanism that actually is focused on keeping the education going. So we need to start thinking about shelter system and teachers that can be mobilized and material that can be distributed. This has to be part of the chain of all these elements that are put in place to have an effective response. And I must say there is an area where civil society is extremely important, because government can really be ready for all these eventualities, but civil society, which is focused on particular area, can very quickly mobilize and often provide a helping hand and actually help structure a much more effective response to major disasters. Back to you.
Thank you. And I really appreciate this point around ensuring that the innovation are meeting and bringing new solution to structural problems that are worsening, instead of having the reverse, along with this idea of building within an ecosystem. And we will talk about this a little bit more. I'd like to ask Lovisa now a final question for this panel. Lovisa, from your perspective, what are the challenges you have encountered even in well-designed parametric insurance solutions?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think these present not only the challenges, but also the design lessons, if you will, which has to be addressed. Even the most well-designed parametric insurance product sometimes goes wrong between the actual payout and the action on the ground. And just imagine, I mean, if there is a shock that's impacting a number of schools, and you may all of a sudden realize that it's not the schools that the model itself has been estimating, or the schools might still be standing, but children can still not make it to the school because of road disruptions. All of a sudden, then you start to realize that reality is far more complex and maybe also far more human than any data and any model itself can accurately estimate. So that means that you need to really carefully think about the right parameter and spend decent time in order to come up with a good design solution. The second point I will mention is the response plan, and we already alluded a little bit towards that, but it's critical to also know who is going to receive the payouts, what are the payouts going to be used for, What are the interventions? And do you want to keep it flexible depending on the local needs on the ground, very similar to cash transfers for those who have worked on that topic as well? So of course, a whole array of different interventions can be relevant in the situation of disruptions to school systems. What may be trauma support or emergency repairs or temporary classrooms, etc. The third point is, of course, also ownership. Very often designers and global insurers tend to get excited about parametric insurance because it comes across as something very technically savvy. But in reality, you need to make sure you also have the local ownership from the ministries and from the schools, but also from the communities. Because if you don't have that consensus on the ground, it would be incredibly hard to implement it, which is why the local ownership is critical. So yeah, again, it's not reasons for not insuring or using parametric insurance. These are rather design lessons that should be accurately thought about. And presents a good avenue to be able to explore an instrument, which actually is in many cases very cost efficient, but also requires and provides the speed and flexibility that's needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you. So we will now move to our next session. We've discussed initially the scale of the problem around the education disruption in the region. We've looked at the need for new approaches and how we could tap in DRF and parametric insurance to address climate resilience in education. So with Hawin and Lovisa, we will discuss a regional education uninterrupted initiative with a focus on the pilot in China. So let me first introduce, maybe I'll move to the Let me first introduce what we call this in education uninterrupted. So it's not just an insurance product. What we try to do is to actually embed the parametric insurance within a child-centered ecosystem that it was pre-existing, and how Save the Children and partner are addressing the climate challenge within education system. The model is trying to answer this key question. What does a child need to stay in school after a climate-induced disaster? So that's where we want to build on our prior investment in education in emergency. As you know, Save the Children is a global lead. We are co-leading with UNICEF, the Global Education Cluster, for example, and we are the NGO with the biggest footprint in education in emergencies. We've also done a lot of work with disaster risk reduction with ASEAN. And so we are building on this prior investment. But what we want to see is that adding parametric insurance, it's not a standalone, it's really something that is building on prior investment and program investment. And that's how we can use it as a catalytic initiative, because it's not enough to be prepared and to anticipate how education may be disrupted by climate disasters. We want also to ensure that there is timely funding, and this is where parametric insurance for education continuity can be implemented. So I want to say that this initiative is something that we have co-designed with country colleagues, and we've closely worked with Accenture Development Partner and government counterpart. We have 6 priorities countries, as I said, China, but we also have Bangladesh, Cambodia, Laos, Nepal, and Pakistan. Save the Children is a implementer of a global initiative funded by the Global Partnership for Education called Climate Smart Education System Initiative. So this project is really providing technical assistance to government to prioritize what kind of climate resilience intervention they need. And so we want to embed our parametric insurance solution within this initiative. So I would like now to give the floor to Hawin, who is going to showcase concretely how this initiative is being started in China. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Nora. Hello. China, actually, just as many other countries right now, sorry. Yeah, sorry. China, just as many other countries right now, it is now facing increasingly damage by floods, typhoons, and drought, just as many other countries right now. And this resulting in an increasing continuity gap. It's really becoming a high risk on this part. So, Save the Children is currently launching 18 months of the foundational design and the feasibility phase. So our goal is twofold: establishing a rigorous technical framework while simultaneously mapping the local regulatory ecosystem. So operationally, we work on 2 tracks at once, while our technical partners, Accenture and Union Insurance Broker, will lead the actuarial climate risk modeling. Save the Children focuses on navigating the pathway towards the state adoption and also engaging with children and local communities. So at the policy level, we leverage China's climate change adaptation strategy 2035. This strategy supports parametric mechanisms. However, even at this moment, education sector remain excluded from this strategy. So to include them, we are actively engaging with Ministry of Education, Ministry of Emergency Management, and China Insurance Regulatory Commissions to secure their endorsement. And our work isn't just a top-down alignment. And at the moment, we rely on this part. We will work firstly to engage with provincial education departments to conduct a comprehensive feasibility study in Guangxi province. So this feasibility study will serve as an empirical foundation, designed not only to test the model's viability, but also to secure the institutional buy-in for a future sustainable scale-up. So to this end, this assessment will also support us to find a pilot location covers about 500 to 600 schools. And from there, we will also replicate this feasibility study into 4 additional provinces, which are Guangdong Province, Sichuan Province, and Chongqing, and also the Guizhou Province. We do this way is trying to ensure that this model will contextually adapt to each unique provincial landscapes. So based on this, crucially, we will also work deeply committed to work with children and also the local communities. So during the whole phases, we will conduct the age-appropriate focus group to understand children's real priorities, such as social cycle supports and also the unique challenge in girls' educations. So finally, we will also work with youth advocates to try to translate the complex insurance triggers into child-friendly language. In this way, it will allow children to validate for themselves whether this kind of the financial thresholds would actually reflect the real-world disruption they face on the ground. Thank you.
Super. I will just take a minute or two to exemplify how this parametric insurance product will be brought to life in the context of China. So what you see in front of you now is a process flow of a number of events that very often take place after a climate disaster has been hitting a school until the response plan is starting to be implemented as. So how Jane already mentioned, we are looking to scale this across 5 different provinces, but we're starting with the initial feasibility study covering 500 to 600 schools. And in that county, we have seen that flooding is by far the most critical climate risk that schools are being exposed to at the moment. So that's why we're starting off with flooding being the one parameter. But we're also exploring further on the typhoons and extreme heat events are also going to be part of the product as we are scaling. So what happens in case a flooding event is taking place is the payouts will be released to the schools within 24 to 48 hours. And that means that at a much quicker pace, the response plans can be activated. And at the moment, we're working on a number of different interventions that includes temporary classrooms, and it includes school repairs and trauma support, among others. And the strength of this is, coming back to the point Francis made earlier, is really that we're able to provide funding so that these children can go back to school within a day or two. And that means we're minimizing the risk of these children to be drop out of school youth. And that's much stronger compared to humanitarian aid that works in a traditional way, only securing funds within 60 to 90 days. So we're able to avoid that gap through a product like this. And how Jin mentioned earlier, it of course takes a whole stakeholder approach to get this to work. We are having, thankfully, Save the Children on the ground, securing that there's a fully child-centered approach. My organization, Accenture, is working with the technical modeling alongside our insurance broker as well. But we're also looking for additional partners. We're having good conversations with philanthropies, and we're, of course, welcoming any one of you here today who are interested in having a conversation with us to just grab us after the session. So with that said, I will pass back to Nora, who will wrap up this segment.
Thank you very much, both Hawin and Lovisa. So I think in this discussion and a presentation that you both gave, you can already see that Education Uninterrupted is an initiative that is really grounded in partnership. And that's one of the lessons learned we've had from other DRF and parametric insurance initiative, is that we really want from the get-go, including with children and their communities, we start having that combination and bringing everyone around the table. And so our final discussion and panel, I would like to invite each person representing their organization to give us their thoughts about how can different stakeholders, the CSOs, the government, the multilateral development bank, and private sector partners really come together, collaborate to design and also find pathway to scale so that these solutions are really replicated and reach the higher number of children. So I would like to start maybe with Lovisa.
Sure, yes. So representing private sector here today, and I must say, of course, private sector plays a critical role in multi-stakeholder partnerships, where Education Uninterrupted is just one example. But in my experience, I very often also see that private sector is somewhat underutilized in cross-sectoral partnerships. My experience is very often that businesses are brought on board rather late in the process, when program design has already happened or when the new financing instrument has already been developed, and therefore very often as a philanthropic partner. Which, of course, you know, to many degree, philanthropy is great to catalyze new ideas and mobilize funds, but if you think about the role, why the business was set up initially, there is typically much more that they can provide than just being a funding partner. My own organization, we asked ourselves this question 25 years ago. We are a global consulting firm, and we have more than 800,000 employees. And we were kind of questioning, how can we become more efficient in helping the development industry to advance their efforts? And we asked ourselves, there must be more than just our balance sheet that we can offer. We already had a philanthropic arm established and introduced. And so we came up with a new business unit that really delivers the core of what we are offering also multinational companies, which is our people and the competence that they sit on. So since then, we've been working extensively with trying to duplicate the infrastructure solutions that we've been setting up for commercial firms to also help with distribution of vaccines across Eastern Africa. We're working extensively with scaling payment solutions to ensure digital financial inclusion across Asia. And of course, Education Uninterrupted is such another example of where we are bringing our expertise in insurance and in modeling and data and risk management to a real example. So I think my kind of call to action here is to make sure you involve businesses early, because then there is so much more that we can be part of and identifying what we actually can offer. Thank you.
Thank you for this call. And Francis, maybe over to you now. I mean, you are an independent consultant with extensive experience at the World Bank. So what's your take on this question?
Thank you, Nora. Yes, let me clarify that I do not represent the World Bank. I'm retired from the World Bank. So nothing I say is a representation of the World Bank or any other multilateral. But indeed, I spent most of my career working for multilateral organizations. And I think the first thing I would say is, and I hope we can all agree, that we should not get development banks involved in running response, right? They're much better organization doing this. First, national government should be in charge, but then you have UN agency, you have UNOCHA, and then you have specialized NGO that do that much better, and will always do it better than multilateral development banks. But if we talk about helping establish systems that then allow for better responses, I think that the multilateral development bank have an important role to play, and probably through three mechanisms: through the convening power, through technical assistance, and through de-risking. And I can go through each one of those step by step. Convening power, I think multilateral development bank are among the few that can bring together ministries of finance, private sector, line ministries, civil society, and try to facilitate dialogue, and in a way act as an honest broker between all these parties that may have diverging interest, and try to help the process move forward. And then there is, of course, technical assistance. Multilateral development bank have fairly usually qualified staff. The ADB just hired Samantha Cook, who is a top expert on insurance. And so when establishing these strategies can be technically complicated. You need to fund data gathering, you need to fund risk modeling, often a platform. And so you need people who have this knowledge, but you need also people who understand those technical aspects, but also understand government. And that's where I think multilateral development bank have a very strong advantage. And then finally, over the last 20 years, the ADB, the World Bank, JICA, and other development banks have developed financial instruments that can be used, contingent lines of credit, guarantees. They can help structure risk transfer solutions on behalf of their client governments. Maybe not forever, but the first few times it's good to have a partner you trust in setting up those systems. And then finally, I will conclude maybe with another very important aspect, which is the fact that development bank can help think from the get-go about how to make systems sustainable and kind of transition from these charity donor-supported pilots towards established system, very often government systems. But it's actually good to think from day one on how this is going to happen, so that all the effort remains sustainable, and then communities can benefit from them over the long run. Back to you, Nora.
Thank you very much, Francis. And yeah, definitely the role of government is at the core of this partnership. Yoko, it will be great to hear what you think of Francis' points around MDB's engagement and your own thoughts on this point.
Great, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. And it was a pleasure to see many of you actually last night for the CSO reception, and now at this really important discussion on the resilience and education and finance sort of nexus that has been discussed. And in terms of, the role that multilateral development bank like the World Bank or Asian Development Bank can play, I think Francis really made a really great point that we can help in developing the system. But, this requires a real partnership with civil society, with government, with private sector. And, the Multilateral Development Bank can come in here with a needed sort of structural sort of system in view, and also in terms of finance and technical expertise to support that. And from that perspective, I wanted to actually share that at ADB, the working on resilience and education system is actually a core of what we do. And as our president mentioned, we have a target of 50% of our investment to address climate change and climate adaptation and mitigation measures. And also in terms of resilience and adaptation, 1/3 of that investment at least to be on the adaptation side. And we actually have been already reaching this 2030 target last year, where we achieved 51% of our investment addressing climate, and then about 40% of our investment addressing adaptation. But then, when it comes to the education sector, what we're discussing, it is really striking that the earlier number of the 242 million of students being impacted, that's 1 in 7 students being impacted by climate change. And we don't see that lightly, and many of that is actually in Asia and the Pacific. So ADB recognized the very important area of work to be in education sector and address this in a timely manner, and combining the sustainable climate action, because it is really important that youth and children and women are core in addressing climate change issue, in addition to, of course, the general education sort of needs that every population have. And in ADB, being increasingly supporting the developing member countries to advance climate resilience through education sector operation. And in doing so, we are designing with robust understanding of impacts of climate risk, and particularly vulnerable population like women and children. And also integrating school and community-based measure is really, really important. And then the third point is that go beyond the pure structural measure to include systemic and also behavioral approaches. And I just wanted to highlight maybe 2 examples that what ADB is doing. So in Solomon Islands, ADB is helping build climate resilience through secondary education improvement. And this includes the reforming of the school curriculum, focusing on skills that foster climate resilience and upgrading school facilities. And like in Nepal, ADB is supporting reconstruction and retrofitting public schools by focusing on strengthening resilience of school buildings and climate and disaster risk, and integrated community-level school disaster improvement measures. And we have supported 7,500 schools through these program and have a safer standard benefiting more than 150,000 students. So with that in mind, I think MDB have a clear role to play to scale these initiatives. And in terms of developing these financial instruments, as we've been talking about, parametrics is one of the key initiatives, but we can also do disaster bonds, debt referred clauses, and policy-based lending, and others. And in order to do that and have a targeted sort of approach to education, ADB has been supporting through technical assistance and working with civil society and others to develop these viable sort of mechanism and financing needs. And also what we are adopting now more and more is a policy-based loan, which can address and support government to implement some of the policy that is related to addressing disaster risk and coming up with financial instruments and support the students and the schools. So there are different instruments that we can have from the ADB sort of many of loans and grants that we provide. And we really look forward to working on these areas together with partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Yoko. It's really good to hear about this different mechanism to build climate resilience in education sector in the region. And I'll ask Howin now to give his perspective on the question.
Thank you. And currently, I'm engaging with the local insurers and also the education departments. So I think I see the local insurance as a kind of like a technical engine in our China pilots. Because why we try to put them on board and working with Accenture together, and there is, I think, very important two things they can contribute. One thing is they can lead the actual rigorous and also the local data validations. And at the same time, when they work together, they can incorporate the international standards and together on this part. And with local insurers support, we can all together to ensure the payout are accurate and immediate. That's one part I think really important for the local insurance to join together. And the other one is education department. Of course, they will provide us a very important policy framework. Especially in the Ministry of Education, their support could help us to ensure the state ownership that in the future they will embed this model into the local public administrative structures. So coming back to like us Save the Children, so we are acting like a strategic mediator. We try to work with the private sectors, and also we try to ensure government departments and also can work together with children to mitigate some gaps and build a sustainable partnership together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your for sharing your experience and insight on this partnership approach. Thank you for those who've put their questions through the pigeonhole. There's maybe opportunity as well to raise your hand and ask the question directly. But let me start with one question. I think it is directed to Lovisa. Who pays the premium of parametric insurance within the Education Uninterrupted initiative?
Thank you. Yeah, so there are a number of different financing streams that we currently are exploring. Initially, we are looking to get support from institutional and private donors with initial seed funding. And then we're also working through the local governments to make sure that we're securing multilateral financing so that we have the right level of support. And that will also help to cover some of the upfront premium. So these are all regions that are, of course, particularly important, both for strengthening and advancing development efforts. And then we're, of course, welcoming blended finance to be a core contributor to this, which is why we're engaging with a whole array of private sector institutes, including my own organization, as well as philanthropies. Thank you.
Another question is about, it's still for you, about how private insurance companies should be covering like communities and students. Can you say that what type of intervention within the Education Uninterrupted that could be covered?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, just to say, like most large insurance companies or reinsurers, they already work with parametric insurance. So Swiss Re and Munich Re, it's part of their core offerings. It's nothing new. But of course, as you say, and kind of hinted towards, like, education is a area where it hasn't been applied as much. So this is a new innovative field that we're really looking to pioneer here. And it's critical, of course, to have the insurance provider to be involved upfront, which is why we are so delighted to have Beijing Union Insurance Broker as well with us. But we're currently working through the details around the response.
Apologies, we're just having a little bit of a technical issue on the plenary on their sound. We are resolving it from our end. Thank you.
Include housing as part of the parametric insurance coverage?
Maybe I can take this question. So Education Uninterrupted is primarily focused on students' learning. So a lot of the intervention, as mentioned, are on the education offer, I would say, right? However, we also recognize that if children's households are affected, their houses are destroyed, or the livelihoods of their parent is destroyed as it is by disaster, we cannot expect them to necessarily be going to school. So we also are considering, as part of the response, how a household can be supported so parents and community do not revert to the usual negative coping mechanisms, such as child labor and so on. But I'll have to stop the question. Don't hesitate to talk to us later. And to close, I would like to invite our PV as our youth advocate to share her last word on behalf of all of us.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you, our panelists, and thank you, ADB, to create this meeting happen, and the World Bank to partnership to all these to the world. And thank you everyone here, and thank you Save the Children to over here. I believe that you guys come here not just to listen, because it's bring care to those who behind those number of the children as well. And in Cambodia, young people across the Asia are not giving up, are not giving up on learning, are not even though it's disaster happen, even though extreme heat of family facing financial, we still believe, we still holding that hope that education can fight, can watch it to fight. And yeah, resilience is real, but resilience alone is not enough. So here, join us as a partnership, as a group and care. And without education, we could not our life will meaningless. Thank you.